I find her very annoying, that
I
Zoom lady.
know. I know.
She makes me feel
Okay.
like I'm doing something wrong. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. I know.
All we
Okay.
have
Now
to
I
do
feel
is
like I
sit
can
here.
relax.
Yes.
Now I can feel like I can relax. We were having just technical difficulties and blame it on the rain, I guess.
Everything else is blamed on the rain. So
Yeah.
let's continue with that.
Yeah. So
Milli
Farron,
Milli Vanilli. Let's do it.
yeah. So you're our first interview, um, our first guest.
Awesome.
So bear with us. Farron let me know that she asked you how you wanted to be introduced, because that's something that I think is always nice to ask ahead of time to make sure that you're being represented the way that you want to be. So I guess Farron will kick it off with the
Mhm.
introduction, and then we've got some questions for you. Um, Again, I always like to preface with guests. I have a podcast on the side and I interview guests. That's mainly the crux of it. But I always like to just make sure that everyone feels comfortable. And if you feel like sharing like a lot, that's great. If you don't feel like sharing that much, that is fine. Like we won't get too personal. Uh,
I'm nothing's off limits with me ever. So
okay,
yeah.
great. Because a lot of background I think is nice for listeners,
Yeah,
just to really get a taste of who you are and maybe where you're coming from as it pertains to whatever we're talking about. So,
totally.
okay,
Mhm.
cool.
That's what we're here to do, so we're going to do it right.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Are we going to start then?
Yeah, we'll get started.
Awesome. Today, we're welcoming Atarah Valentine. He's a certified hypnotherapist, embodiment, and mindset coach. He is owner of the wellness brand The Seed Level, specializing in working with inner child healing, trauma recovery, mental and emotional release therapy, neuro-linguistic programming, PTSD, cancer, law of attraction, immune disorders, and weight loss. And we are so excited to have him as a guest on the podcast today. Welcome, Atarah.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be your first interview that you guys are ever doing on this.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. I have been working with you for over a year now, so I've gotten to get to know you that way and seen your work change my life in that context. So, to
Hmm.
get started, can you give a little bit of your background and what led you to becoming a hypnotherapist and a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because one of the biggest topics that people come to me for is really trying to figure out identity. And for so many of us, we completely base our identity off of what we do for a living. Right. And that doesn't necessarily have to be career, right? That could be we're a mother, we work on Wall Street, we're a musician, and we completely craft our whole life around this one singular idea. And I spent my entire life doing that, right? I was the creative person in my family. I was the person nobody understood. And I was constantly reminded of that. The first half of my life, I spent exclusively just doing music. That is what I was doing professionally up until I even started doing this. This kind of happened accidentally. And it's interesting because so many people will come to me, especially if I do a Q&A, and they'll say, you know, I'm 30 years old and I still don't know my purpose and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I'm just like, they're like, how did you find your purpose? You're so aligned with what you're supposed to be doing. And I said, well, to be honest, I let go of the idea that I needed to have a purpose. Because when we do that, what are we really trying to do here, right? We're trying to find some kind of fulfillment, some kind of happiness. That does not come from one single place. It comes from having a really rich life in all different areas within our friendships, our relationship to our family, our personal interests. Yes, also career, but career is just one tiny piece of the pie. So much of my life was spent judging myself based on what I wasn't achieving, what somebody else got, why I wasn't good enough to get that, why am I never getting the opportunity? And I would constantly try and bend and shape and shift myself into being the version of myself that I thought I had to be for the opportunity to come to me. And in the process of doing that, because I thought my purpose was to be a musician, in the process of doing that, I completely lost myself, my happiness, my identity, my connection to music to begin with. The whole reason I even started to do this, which was to share my story, to express myself, to connect with other people. And it became about, how do I connect with this person in the industry? How do I make them believe in me? What song is Sony going to be able to sing? So I completely removed myself and every part of my being from my actual day-to-day life. And I felt really lost and really empty. And I'd always been, because I always was made to feel like an outsider. I didn't feel like an outsider. I thought I was like everybody else until I left the house and they told me otherwise, right? And so in the process of doing this, I've always been looking for more answers. Right. And I said this a lot, but I was a 12-year-old kid who was subscribed to Psychology Today, who was reading about the Kabbalah, who was reading about Buddhism, who was reading about, alternative sides to Christianity. I was raised very Catholic. And I just always was looking for an answer and an understanding of kind of what is the point of all of this. So it's a journey that I was on my whole life, but it was always for me just to have some kind of education or understanding so I could just understand who I had to be in my life for how to function, right? How to find happiness. What does that even mean? What is the point of life? And that's very overwhelming. So I would constantly think myself into a really negative place because I was overloaded. Then I had so many ingestive addictions because in my house, food was love, food was comfort. You had a hard day, here's food. You did something good, let's celebrate with food, right? And then that completely separated me from my body. And I feel like I wasn't really raised to understand how to be myself, how to live within my body, how my body works, what food does, right? I grew up in New Jersey with, a pretty poor education in the grand scheme of what's available to people. And in a place where there was a lot of limits and a lot of limitations on who you could be, how much money you could make, what your life could look like. So I was raised to be small. And even though I had this creative piece inside of me that really needed to be expressed, I could never show up in order to share it. So even when an opportunity came forward, because I always needed someone outside of me to tell me I was talented, right? To make me believe in myself because they believed in me, because that's what I learned I had to do to be validated, right? To have any kind of relevancy in anything that I was. So obviously that doesn't usually take us to the place that we want to be. And even if it does, we're usually incredibly dissatisfied because we feel like we're being rewarded for what we do, not necessarily who we are still. So there's still a dissociation or a separation between those two things, right? So I was majorly depressed to the point I wasn't eating, I wasn't getting dressed, I wasn't leaving my house, I was disconnecting myself from everybody. And I just kind of hit a wall and I thought, like, I just can't keep living my life like this. And at that time I started studying Kabbalah. That was probably 20 years ago. And that really, just completely changed my life. But again, because I was so suggestible, it's really easy at that time. And we know when we're very vulnerable and we go into new modalities, we, live and breathe each thing like it's the only thing that exists and it's the only truth. And I got very caught up in the politics of what the Kabbalah Center was that time, which was, great in so many ways, but it was very political. And the people who spent the most money were treated a certain way and all of this stuff. So I really got roped into that and then lost myself again and then rocked bottomed and then tried to find something else and then built up momentum and lost myself in that. And then that seemed to be the pattern and I could never break that. So finally, I started just absorbing as much information as possible because that's how we learn, that's how we grow. And I realized there's something that somebody else knows that I don't know, because there are all these people around me who are receiving everything that I want, right? And internally, I know I have what they have, but something's just not connecting, right? And I started doing, whether it was manifestation work, whether it was just work on myself, and I started to notice things changing. And that led me to obviously working with To Be Magnetic, in which probably was the first job ever in my life where I was totally myself. And I didn't take any bullshit from anybody from literally my first interview. We do this, we do this, we do this. Well, this is who I am. So if you want to hire me, this is what it's going to look like. Oh, but this and this, well, that's not what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. And that was my relationship the whole time that I was there, because it was really the last thing that I needed in order to be able to build something for myself, because I'd always worked for other people's companies. Because again, codependency, what do I have to prove to you? Oh my God, what hoops do I have to jump through? Make it really hard for me. So by the time I do A, B, and C, I feel like I've earned this.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to break that cycle, and I was doing it slowly, but that last job was the last infrastructure that I was ever within, that I had really had the opportunity to just see where I was, to really see if I could live everything that I was trying to be, if I could really show up in my real life the way that I was showing up in my hypnosis and my meditations. And I was really successful within it. So I ended up being the coach that was the most booked out months in advance. That never happened before I joined the company. I ended up developing a lot of their, went back in their inner child program, their shadow program, their how to manifest program. I created a relationship program. I created something called the extra layers, because there were so many moving pieces in the world and people were in such vulnerable states. So I was able to create something to help those people that we released as a free tool. And just like every other job, it started to feel like, well, where do I go from here? I can keep giving and keep doing, but it's kind of not really making sense. And that was really the catalyst for me leaving and starting my own company. And in doing that and being able to take all of my creative energy and being able to take all of the education and everything that I gave myself, and to be able to create something for myself and have it to be successful, was just such an incredible gift and a testament to, this is exactly how much time I needed in order to make this happen. And I want to be really clear with that, because we all have this pressure that we put on ourselves that we should have achieved the thing that we wanted to 6 months ago or a year ago or 5 years ago, or that time that we were supposed to say yes, but we said no. And we think that was the thing that was going to change our life. That opportunity will come again if you allow it to, if you show up. And it's your job to really lean into yourself so that you can live your life and wake up in your life from this perspective and place of creation, because that is what we do. That as human beings, we're able to think about things. We have a critical faculty. We can compare and contrast. We can learn. We can take that. We can literally make a physical manifestation that represents who we are, what we know, into the world. And we can do that with something as small as our day or our friendships or our work. And I couldn't have even received the success that I had with my company if I wasn't in that place.
Wow. Atarah. Well, I just want to say, I've recently become a fan. I did discover you through To Be Magnetic, and then I follow you on Instagram, and I love all of your posts. You give so much wisdom. But thanks for sharing your background and what you had to go through to get you to this point. And gosh, I have so many things that I want to bring up right away. But the first one is, I love how you brought up about us just trying to be something or just to identify with one thing. And we spend so much time and energy and effort to try to be this one thing that we need to be, when actually we just have to let ourselves just experience everything and anything, which then creates us, which helps to create us become who we're supposed to be. If I'm like articulating that right. It's like you're like reverse engineering how we go about how we've been conditioned to behave and act as children, which then sets us on like a whole other trajectory into our adult lives.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, it was really powerful when you touched on looking for outside validation and realizing that you needed to go inward, and touching on pattern recognition, which, if you break it down, is really what this whole thing is about. And my relationship with hypnotherapy and working with you is really like, I need somebody sometimes to take that lens out and help me see, because we're so embedded and blinded to our conditioning and what's happening sometimes. And how were you able to go about that, kind of gain that wisdom and perspective to get so embodied and aligned to the person you are now? Because that was a big jump, and I think one that we can
Definitely.
all relate to for sure.
Yeah. And that's a great question, because the way that I was able to is I had to.
Mm.
I didn't have any more options, right? And that's, I've dealt with suicidal ideation since I was in third grade. I was bullied from a very young age. I was physically abused as a child. I was emotionally abused in my house, outside of my house. So I was always backed against a wall trying to find an escape route. But when I would run out of my power or my fuel or the energy to constantly do and be everything for everyone to the point of exhaustion, I always had to wrestle with suicidal ideation, which sounds like a sad thing. And people, and I want people to really listen to exactly how I'm saying this, so nothing's misconstrued. But for me, it gave me the feeling of choice when I felt like I had no power.
Mm.
And I'm appreciative
Mm.
for that idea of choice, even though I never wanted that to be the option that I would choose, right? But it always kept coming back. And it made me really feel, in even really great moments in my life where incredible things were happening, right? Got a great manager, played Lollapalooza, but I felt empty because I wasn't playing Lollapalooza as myself. I was writing the music that I thought I had to write for Sony to put into a commercial or to get me into a movie. So I didn't even want people to look at me in that sense. And sometimes my biggest successes have been the times that I felt that the biggest burden or the biggest emptiness. And that's when that kicked in. And ultimately, when we talk about pattern recognition, that's what I realized. I feel really strong when I'm in the fight, when I have something to prove, because it's how I learned to live my life. But as soon as I'm done proving and people are there to accept me, that's when I get terrified, right? Or not anymore, thank God. But that's when I used to get terrified. That's when I used to then destroy everything because I didn't know how to have people like me, right? So, and yes, was I writing songs that like I was still proud of and stuff? Yes. Were they completely authentic to me? No. And that is where I put my time and my energy. How can I destroy this opportunity now so I can go back to the point that feels comfortable, which is me having to survive? Right. So that is why I broke the pattern, because I realized every time I'm supposed to be happy, quote unquote, I'm the most miserable that I've ever been in my life. Is this how I want to continue to feel for the rest of my life? To feel like I just have to stay safe and settled into, my familiar reality and never achieve anything or do anything that's exciting to me? Or do I want to learn how to prepare myself to receive the things that I actually want? And that's where I decided to put my energy.
That's so powerful, because I think a lot of people are stuck in, or don't even realize that, oh, I'm addicted to feeling not good enough, feeling this anxiety, feeling, this state of struggle. And that's where I'm actually addicted to.
Yeah, definitely.
Hmm. Um,
I had a thought on here too. You kind of touched something in regards to even just the wellness center, or just that you were always putting yourself in different experiences or different situations where you were still confining yourself to certain parameters, like still putting yourself into a box. And you still kept, again, like you brought up the wellness industry. it was like, okay, you had tackled being a musician, you had gotten through some childhood trauma. Now you're like on the ups, but you still weren't feeling like you were truly embodying yourself. You were still staying in this, I don't want to say toxic environment, but you're staying in a place that was not serving you well at all, was not serving your purpose. And I think that's so important because in this industry that we're in, yeah, I tend to see a lot of women, men including, looping in the same pattern. It's like, okay, I've got to this level, but I'm still not where I want to be, because again, we keep putting ourselves into boxes of who we think we should be. And it doesn't matter what the industry is.
100%. And let me jump on a few things that you said, because we're not consciously doing this, right? Said nobody ever.
Right.
Let me keep doing the same thing over and over and looking for the same problem so I can never have any of the things I want in my life, right? Like that, nobody wakes up and sets that intention for the day, right? It just does not happen. We do intellectually, most of us have a sense of what we more so don't want. I found with people, right? People are really good at telling you what they don't want, not so good at telling you what they do actually want, right? Because they feel uncomfortable asking for it, because they actually haven't thought about it, because so much of the way that we've learned to exist as human beings is to react, right? There's something here, react to it. What are you going to do about this? How are you going to do this? How are you going to make that person happy? So we're constantly looking for those environmental cues that are going to inform us how we have to show up to fix the problem or solve the issue or stay safe, right? So in doing that, in developing these patterns and repeating these patterns, we're also locking in emotional states and expectations within them, right? So that becomes the automatic behavior. And that is why when we look at something like willpower, for example, even science is telling us that is not available to us all the time anymore, right? Like we used to think, oh, willpower, they're strong, they have a strong willpower, and this person doesn't. But now we know willpower is more available to us in the morning when we're waking up from sleep, we're rested, our heads are less congested, right? We're taking in less input. So it's all of that over processing that we do throughout the day that really pulls us out of the present moment, because we're so overloaded. Our brain cannot handle all of the stimulation that we're putting in front of it, right? And then what do we do to relax? We scroll through Instagram. Well, guess what, folks? You're still visually processing things. You're still reading. You're hearing things. That is not a break for your brain, right? In fact, when you're doing that, your brain is in a hyper state of suggestibility. So all of that stuff goes in even more and reinforces usually the things that we don't want to be reinforced. So that's what so much of this is about, right? It's no different when I work with someone with PTSD, for example, we go through 3 different phases. And these are clinically the phases that have been proven to work. The first thing we have to do, and just side note, this isn't just for people with PTSD. What I found in all of my training is this is everybody, right? Because let's face it, majority of people, whether they're aware of it or not, are dealing with some kind of PTSD post-COVID, because that was fucking crazy, right? And it was terrifying. We didn't know if it was airborne. We didn't know what was happening. It completely disrupted the way that we lived our lives. And most of us spent that time numbing, whether it was alcohol, whether it was using drugs, whether it was just obsessively watching TV or scrolling through Instagram, right? So it really pulled us outside of ourselves, and the concept of who we thought we were was completely destroyed. That's why so many people at this point post-COVID are on antidepressants and things, because they don't know how to reacclimate into their lives and into their bodies, right? So if we think about that and we look at everything that's happening and we compare it to how you work with someone with PTSD versus codependency versus someone who just feels they have low self-worth or, is a perfectionist, the same thing needs to happen, because all of these issues that we suffer with are all because of anticipatory anxiety, right? Because there's an expectation that we believe we need to meet outside of us that is always going to come for us. So our head is always a few beats ahead of the present moment, because there's always something to defend or fix or protect from. So when I work with people, the first thing that we focus on is stress inoculation, really teaching people how to come back into their bodies to create sensory experiences for themselves at their own will, not in a reactive way where everything kicks in so we can protect ourselves. Then from there, we start looking at kind of like cognitive behavioral therapy. We start looking at raising awareness, identifying what the issues are, seeing what these behaviors are trying to protect us from, seeing how reinforced these behaviors are, what would we like to do instead, right? So we can really begin to map out a plan. And within that, we see where I'll say the word blocks because that's a word people are familiar with, but I hate that word. I call them perimeters of comfort because that's what it is. It is what is fencing you into what is comfortable. And as soon as you start thinking outside of what is comfortable, those things make themselves known to you. So we don't have to go looking for them, right? As soon as you're being intentional and starting to shift through, they will pop up on their own. And we look to really disassemble those and begin to create new neural architecture in hypnosis with things like whether it's mental and emotion release therapy, whether we're using NLP, whether we're doing traditional hypnosis, whether we're doing EFT, to begin to create new neural pathways around presence, being in our bodies, being intentional, slowing down, and proactive change. And we'll keep reinforcing that immersion, right? Internally, until that feels real to the point that when you open your eyes, you just kind of look around and wonder, wait, why aren't I doing this? You're not met with that fight-flight response because you've already taught your nervous system, your subconscious mind, this is how this feels. This is how I do this. I know this. This is no longer unfamiliar.
I love
that. Yeah. Do you have any tips on a practical way that people can start getting embodied and staying? To me, the embodiment also means staying aligned, connecting with your intuition, and like you said, calming your nervous system.
Yeah. And I would say also, just to add on that, embodiment is being who you are instead of how you've been taught to be. Because how you've been taught to be may not necessarily be who you are. And it's that kind of like incongruency between those two things that most of our pain and frustration comes from in life, right? So if you want a really easy exercise, because again, when I ask people in session, what do you want? Really simple, right? This is a magic wand. If I wave this and went like this, I want you to tell me, what do you want? What do you want to be different? What behavior do you want different? What do you want to be happening differently outside of you? And most people go,
they don't know, probably, right?
They don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so they go, and I'm like, think about it. I'm like, why are you here? Right. And they'll say something really, it seems simple, but it's really complicated, actually. They'll go, I want to be more confident. Cool. What does that mean? Deer in the headlight look. And they go like I don't want to feel uncomfortable when I go to speak up. Like I don't want to be afraid to make a suggestion to my friends. Like I don't want to feel shy when I know I have something to offer. And I said, I didn't ask you what you don't want. I asked you, what does confidence mean to you? And that's a testament to like why we get stuck, right? We don't understand how to navigate through that. If we are so hyper aware of what we don't want, actually what's going to happen is we're going to reinforce that we don't want these things. And our brain's going to be looking for those things that we don't want, be like, oh, there it is. Then we feel triggered. Oh, there's the thing you don't want. Get away.
Like we're not giving us setting up guarding. We're already guarding ourselves.
Totally.
To not anything
right. You're creating a construct, right? And now because we know this fear of what we don't want, we're so familiar with it. We're really good at spotting it, even if it's unconscious, right? So we want to take it a step further. We want to reframe all of the don'ts into actually things we do want. And it's super easy. So this is the exercise I would recommend for everybody. Whether it's your career, your relationship to yourself, your partnership, your friendships, your relationship with your family, sit and write what you don't like about those things. I don't like that I shrink when I'm with my family. I don't like that people say things to me that make me uncomfortable and I just sit there. I don't like being treated this way. I don't like that I overwork, even though I know I'm overworking in the moment. I don't like that at the end of the day, when I say I'm not going to have a glass of wine, I still have a wine. And then draw a line down that paper, flip it on its head. Because what you do want is, it's really simple. It's the exact opposite of what you don't want. So if at the end of the day, you don't want to drink a glass of wine to numb, what do you want? Let's identify that. Let's raise awareness and then ask yourself, why is that important to me? Because in the moment that you want that glass of wine, you're going to go, oh, right? Because that's what's reinforced. Oh, but wine sounds so good. And we start salivating. We start like visualizing the glass of wine and how relaxing it is, right? And our body gets ready for the wine because it knows what to do with that, right? So as soon as you're stressed out, you're going to want to grab that wine. So it's great to have this marker outside of you. So you can go, okay, what's the behavior that I'm doing? Oh, I'm going for the wine. What did I say I wanted instead? This. And you're going to be like, oh, that's bullshit. I don't want to do that. And then you're like, no. I wrote why that's important. So let me just pause and take a moment. That's a really easy way to start creating accountability because it's not about, torturing yourself or going without. It's what we call in hypnosis cross addiction. We try to never just take something away. We always try to supplement it with an alternative. And that alternative may not initially be the best version of what you could do, but once you can break this habit and start doing this one that's less destructive, then we can move that one over and we can update it and we can work on that. And if we allowed ourselves the time, patience, and grace to actually do these things and learn how to take these small steps and to reinforce these small steps, we can work on the production of it later. We can work on the length that we do it later. The hardest part is the actual disruption.
Yeah. And I think you're speaking a lot to how we actually use neurology to manifest. You are simply learning a series of new behaviors slowly that are leading you closer to the person that you want to be, to making the decisions for what you want to have in your life, so on and so forth. It's not about being the same person doing the same things and something magically appearing out of left field or something.
100%. And it's funny because so many sessions, especially because I used to teach manifestation and I don't anymore, not because I have anything against it per se, but I just don't because I found a lot of people which is so many of us, who have codependent tendencies tend to transfer that codependency now into manifestation. What is the universe trying to tell me? Oh my God, what is this? Am I going to pass this? Oh my God, what if this happens? Oh my God, do I do this? Did I do that? Like the universe is their mom, right? It's like the universe really doesn't care. Everything already exists. We're all living within it, right? So what is the issue here? What do we do about that? Because some of my clients are like, well, I really want this. And I've been saying no to everything that doesn't feel aligned and no to this and no to that and no to that and no to that. And I'm like, great. And how are you feeling? They're like, nothing's coming through. I'm just waiting. Like, when is the universe going to bring me the thing? When is it going to happen? I'm keep saying no. Where is it? And I'm like, did you ever just stop to think for a second? Because this is real pragmatic manifestation. And this is the truth. That thing that you're saying no to, because it's not perfectly aligned with who you want to be, may actually unfold into something that is so much bigger down the road that you don't have the awareness of, right? So let's say if you're a musician, because this is a great example, because this is how I really drained all of my value from myself for decades. So I would say, I'm not writing with songwriters. I don't do top line. I don't do this. I don't do that. I produce myself. I mix everything. I don't want anyone to tell me what to do, not even my manager. But I really want a manager. But then no manager knew what to do with me because I told them everything, right? So it doesn't really work. So I was always waiting for my opportunity. No. I want this really big thing. I wasn't at the place to have that really big thing. Doesn't matter how talented I was. I wasn't connected. I didn't have a network. I didn't have anything. And this is the reality. Sometimes we have to do, and we call it sessions, writing sessions in the music industry. We have to do the session that we don't want to do because we feel like it doesn't have value because we're the artist and we don't need help and all this other stuff that's really just more ego driven. Because maybe you'll go and you'll write the shittiest fucking song you've ever written in your life. But then that person will play it for their friend. That friend plays it for their friend who's a manager. And the person goes, wow, this song is really fucking shitty. But that guy's voice is incredible. Who is he? That is how we kind of spin our web. That is how we actually manifest. It's not about sitting and waiting for the right thing. It's about putting out all of these little potentials. It's not your job to figure out how they connect. It's your job to go and meet the people. It's your job to follow up with your clients. It's your job to put the workshop out because you want to start writing the book because you're inspired, to start putting the songs out because they're meaningful to you, to keep creating and create real estate. Right? You're creating real estate. You're investing in yourself. And all of these things slowly, totally out of your hands, can start coming together because you're obviously becoming more secure in that process. Also, you're like, oh my God, I am so talented. This is good. Okay, this isn't what I want, but wow, I just met 50 people who connected me to 50 more people. Now I have this huge network.
Mm-hmm. You're subconsciously just planting the seeds and creating your web. It's all going to come together. Mm-hmm. I love your thoughts on everything in terms of that. Fair and I are probably laughing because we've had some talks around dating. I get very passionate about talking about dating and that, you know, the whole thing just going back to like manifestation lists about like, I want the guy that's this and he has to be this and the job and this. And I'm like, go date everyone, go and do and be, like, say yes to the opportunity. He may not be the guy that is right then and there, the one that you think, but he might eventually evolve into that. And you will never know unless you take the chance.
100%. And it's funny because whenever I do any relationship Q&As on my Instagram, people get so like turned up and they'll say,
I would agree.
Right. Because this is the reality. And they're always the single people who get angry. Mm-hmm. But this is the reality. If you are the single person, you probably don't want to take advice from other single people. So the advice that might be making you angry, that people who are in really loving long-term relationships are saying to you that you feels condescending, there's something you have to work on. Right. And a big version of that we see a lot of the time is, and a couple things, right? Like I'll say exactly what you just said. Create opportunity for yourself. Go out with people, because I promise you, most of us, even like the idea of making a manifestation list for a person, to me is completely absurd. Because the reality is this. I promise you do not actually know what you want, which is why you keep dating the same fucking narcissistic asshole who has the cool tattoos and the this and this, right? Because what you're drawn to is proven over and over to be unhealthy. So let's just start by saying, if that is you, you probably don't have a great barometer on what you actually need or what you're looking for. So when you go out with somebody or you see somebody, you may be reading them as boring because there's no trauma attached to it. And you may have to learn through the experience of going out with them a few times to be like, oh, actually, I feel completely safe in myself. I actually feel like I can completely show up as myself with this person. And you may develop the kind of feelings you've never experienced in your life. That is why it's important. When I say this to people, they'll go, you know, then again, they come back and they're like, oh, well, that is not fair to take advantage of people when you're dating. If you're not interested in them because they're wasting money on me, cool, pay for your part then. Don't expect them to pay for the whole bill if you have that guilt, but don't use it as an excuse to just not date people and not connect, because you are isolating yourself. And that is the real issue here. It's not because there aren't people on apps. It's not because people can't find love in Los Angeles. That's such bullshit. You're surrounding yourself with people who are in the same exact place that you are. So take advice from people who have the things that you want. Ask them how they do things, right? Because they know something that you don't. And if that makes you feel insecure, great, because it should, because that insecurity is the thing that you don't know that needs to be worked on. That insecurity is the thing that you don't know in the contrast to the thing that they do know. So if we give it some time and attention, that will become your strength. That's what we're trying to do here, not just protect who we think we need to be and hope no one ever sees that thing. The person who loves you will also love that thing, or they'll find it cute, or they'll want to help you work through it, right? You don't have to hide anything. That's not how we have real connection.
Yeah. Yeah. It, not only with relationship, but I was doing it across the board, and we were talking about my art and my career as an artist, and I had all this stuff coming in, and I was like, that's not it, that's not it. And you straight up were like, how do you expect anything to change if you're saying no to everything? And then it was like on a cellular level, like light bulb moment for me. I'm like, oh shit, I'm doing this everywhere, like in dating and in career and the whole thing. So yeah, that's such a powerful realization.
And look, yeah, because look what it opens up, right? And can I elaborate on that conversation? Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Are you positive?
I have something to say afterwards too, but
okay. Because let me tell you something about Miss Farron, who's sitting on here. She does not like it when what you say is not the thing that she's doing, right? There was so much.
Please tell them how much better I've gotten.
No, I am going to.
I will say, I just met Farron a year ago, and I've seen so much change in Farron over the last year. So keep
Farron's
going. Keep going,
fucking crushing it. That's
She's
the
amazing.
reality. But it's funny because we'll call it a Farron, right? Because we'll make a whole type out of it, right? Because it's actually my favorite kind of client. Farron is the perfect example of my favorite kind of client. Why? Because they're not just coming to me and expecting answers and accepting everything I'm saying at face value. Most of the people I work with are pretty educated in this space. They've used a lot of modalities. They're not walking into anything blindly, right? They do have a pretty strong concept of self, but there are some things that are frustrating that maybe they can't see within the context of that. So they're not just going to believe what I say because I'm saying it. So they challenge it. And I love that because it shows me, no, there's so much of you that is really secure, actually. The protection piece is coming in because that protection piece is stopping me from seeing that vulnerability that we need to get to, right? Mm-hmm. So I love getting that pushback because it's a great working off point. And then, and sometimes it only takes a few moments. It's like the matrix opens up, right? Like, and I hate that word in the wellness industry. I mean, like, reference to the movie where everything like shoots back, right? And you have full perspective and you're like, oh my God, that's the thing. Mm-hmm. And you've been awesome with that. And it has been. It's been such a joy working with somebody who is so passionate and who is so strong, who now is also so trusting, which is super important.
Thank you. Yeah, I took this upcoming chat as a invitation to listen to all my past episodes, sessions with you. and I was like, whoa, like listening to last January, like a year ago compared to now is just like, oh my goodness.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah, such a huge, huge difference. And it's not that it's just one thing, but I will say having somebody who's such an amazing pattern recognizer and has the ability to communicate that lovingly and be such a fantastic mirror and give me so many tools to work within that and really empower myself to be able to do these things and be able to change and not have to lean on anything and know that I can have my own answers and that I have more of a toolkit now of things that are coming up for me and continuously coming up for me to deal with. So I I just adore you, and working with you has been
Thank you.
so instrumental in the person that I've become as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And, and I want to say something too, because this is the reality for everybody listening. I want everyone to really stop believing that someone you're working with has the answers, someone you follow on Instagram has the answers, some guru has the answers, the shaman who's doing A, B, and C has the answers, because they don't. A good practitioner will help you find your answers, because your answers are completely unique to you. They're not anybody else's. You actually do have the power here. So many of us just don't understand it. And that's why it is important sometimes to work with people to get perspective, right? That's why even something like an audio recording is so beneficial, because like we said, we keep looking for our patterns. We keep redoing the same things, and we feel like our life isn't progressing because we don't have these markers, these tangible things that we could put on to be like, oh my God, that's how I was, right? Because we just always kind of feel the same, right? When things change outside of us, we are like, oh, things are different, but we still feel the same within our lives to the most part, right? So having an audio is such a cool thing, because there's so much learning even in that. And I've had so many like argumentative clients who I, again, love, who I'll go to explain how their mind works. And I'm like, well, and this is, and like, yeah, well, I know that. So blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yes, but like, let me just get through this, because, well, I know, because and actually it's a blah, 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 right. And I'm like, so what do you, and they'll just kind of interrupt. And even if I'm mirroring back exactly what they're saying, like, well, I just felt growing up that my mom abandoned me and I was left to take care of myself. And I'll say, so I hear that you felt like you were left to take care of yourself and your mom abandoned you. I didn't say that. I said, and I'm like, when you listen back to the recording, I think you'll find that that's exactly what you said, because I take extensive notes, right? So, but it's interesting, because for me, I don't leave that session feeling like, oh, this was unproductive. I leave that session feeling like, as soon as this person hears this session, they're going to hear exactly what their issue is. Right? And they always come back in the next session and they almost laugh. They're like, oh my God, I am so sorry. I just interrupted you like the whole time. I'm just going to just sit here and listen for a while, right? And I'm like, listen, don't apologize. That is exactly what you needed to do in that moment. And you also needed to hear that you were doing it. That was a really exceptional session, actually, because of that. Because it's not my job to be like, stop talking, I'm the professional, listen to me. You were doing what you needed to do in that moment. And now you got to listen back to it and sit with it and see if it was effective for you. You found that it wasn't. Maybe you would have found that it was and we would have stopped working together, but most people don't. They're like, oh, I see. I'm stopping myself from going anywhere. I'm constantly retracting. I'm constantly withdrawing. That's what's important about working with people. That's that mirror that we're looking for.
Yeah. I just want to be, God, this has been such a great conversation. I could continue talking to you, forever. I just want to be cognizant of the time and your time, and ask that, since we're coming up on the hour here, is there anything that we missed that you'd like to share? I definitely share about your programs that are out there, because they've been also so amazing, helpful. And anything else?
No, I mean, listen, my programs are really great. I'm not on here to do a sales pitch to say go buy them. They're really helpful if you want to. There's a trigger one, and there's one that taps into your body's biological rhythm to really help expedite change and set intention daily. There's a lot of free content on my Instagram, because I'm totally aware that not everybody can afford to pay for a session with me or a package with me, or sometimes even a workshop. So I try to be very generous with my Q&As on there and with my content to make sure that I'm available to people in whatever way, shape, and form that they can access me. And for anyone who is interested in working with me, I'm booked out until May. And sometimes people are like, well, I need to see you right now. And I just want to say this because this has been the biggest issue with scheduling. For so many of us, we've lived our whole lives looking through this lens, repeating this pattern. In the grand scheme of our lives, 4 months is not a long time to wait in order to have the opportunity to really look it in the face. So don't let that deter you from booking a session. If you want to, we will crush it when we're there together. If you can't afford to do that, I'm working really hard right now on a subscription model that is going to be really accessibly priced. That is just going to have, I can't even tell you how many tools. It's absolutely insane, but really practical, pragmatic, actionable, and empowering. And that is exactly how any work that you're doing on yourself should feel. If it feels painful, if you're crying all the time, if it's depleting your self-worth, it's probably not aligned. I promise you, growth does not have to be painful. It can be exciting. We just have to really work within an infrastructure that is set up to make it feel that way. So don't be afraid to do it. If it feels uncomfortable, it's probably not right for you, and try something else.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's why it's called self-discovery. You should have these wonderful aha moments versus like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that, like, you shouldn't have these traumatic moments as you're uncovering.
No,
and
I have to sit in my childhood for the rest of my life because everything's bad. No, you don't.
Right. That's something I've been working with in the last year, about my childhood years, being a young mother, and learning that now does not define me. It's like a book has closed. That's like an old book. I'm ready to write the new book now. Just like any famous novelist has written multiple books, and they're all maybe, defining a certain side of their life. And also, just back to your booking, I mean, your programs and your offerings sound incredible. I was doing some sleuthing on the seed level and checking out your work. I think I'm going to book a session with you. I'd love to. But yeah, to the listeners, everything comes in the right time.
And listen,
it really
and the right,
and that's when you're going to need to get that medicine or work through that issue. And I guess even just planting that seed of knowing that you have a session booked with you, I'm sure just taking that first step is already going to start creating your web. And then you're going to discover more things that kind of come up, and you might be moving through something completely different than what the time that you did the booking.
100%, right? And that is what happens with a lot of people. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe that's where I was when I booked this, right? And we are so much stronger and more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. So kind of what you're saying, even with everything comes at the right time, I want to be really clear that statement isn't a woo-woo statement like, oh, because the universe is doing it. Like, that's not what it's about, right? The right time is the time that you're actually going to be able to show up and receive it fully. And that cannot be rushed with anything that you're trying to do. And just, I want to end on the note, like when I do timeline therapy with people where we elicit a timeline and we think of like events, these things that they say, oh, I want a partnership tomorrow. And then we actually have them visualize this partnership and imagine drawing it in closer on their timeline. They feel anxiety. They're like, no, that's too close. Let's push it back. Well, push it back. What, a week? Is a month? They're like, I need like 6 months. And then they can feel really content in their decision because now they know they're not ready for this thing and that they have 6 months worth of discovery, of reinforcement that they need to do to be able to really receive the thing that they want. And that's really powerful because it's the truth, because everything we want, we're not necessarily ready for it in this exact moment.
Right.
And that's okay.
100%. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Atarah. Thank you. This has been such an amazing conversation. I've learned so much and I've reflected on a lot, and I'm sure Farron, you can say the same. Where can the listeners find you? Do you mind just rattling off where to find you?
I'm just at Atarah Valentine on Instagram. I have a Twitter, but I'm deleting it because I think Twitter is disgusting. And and I just started a TikTok finally, because I've been pushed to do that, and I didn't want to until someone really told me how it works, which I find fascinating now. So now I'm like all in. And that's just at Atarah Valentine too.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
thank
thank
you
you both for
so
having me.
much, Atarah. Thank you for making the time. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Right.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right. So I'm gonna end this, or I'm gonna stop recording.